Hey, what is up, guys? It's Giltspire here, and welcome back to Champions of the Fog. Today, I am joined by a very special guest. I am joined by Dir3Wolf. Dir3Wolf, how are you doing today?
Doing well. I'm excited to be here with you. We have come into contact just today, and it has been an amazing experience so far to talk to you, get to know everything you're setting up here. So I'm absolutely hyped for the match we see, absolutely hyped to be here with you. I just say thank you for the invitation.
Hey, anytime, and thank you for actually offering. Initially, we were figuring out which match was going to be streamed, and Keeperly reached out to me and was like, hey, I know we're doing a coin flip for which game's going to be streamed. If we don't stream the Monarchy game, could Dir3Wolf host? I'm like, wait a second, Dir3Wolf? Like, DBE Dir3Wolf? And it's like, hold on a second, let's see what the coin lands on. Landed on Monarchy. Is like, you know what? Let's get you on board. Let's talk a little bit. And so Dir3Wolf and I have actually been talking for a while now today, and talking about, figuring out what we can do to improve COTF, how we can interact between DBE and COTF, and maybe even getting some teams from DBE over here as well.
Absolutely. You said we have started talking, I believe it was 2 or 3 hours from now,
Yes.
and we have touched so many topics so far. We have talked about competitive balancing, we have talked about rule sets, we have talked about chances to get newer players into the community and get them started to play. So what I can say already is that we will have many talks to come based on what I've seen so far, and I'm pretty hyped for it. I love this spirit already. I've read through the chats here. I've seen the audience earlier, being with the teams that have played on all sides. It's an amazing place, so I'm very happy to be here.
No, very happy to have you here, and I'm sure the community is as well. But with that being said, we are loading into our first game of today between How Do We Get Here and Monarchy, and we have Hammy as Killer on for How Do We Get Here on Azarov's resting place. So I know you've watched plenty of matches. We talked a little bit about Azarov's resting place in our prior conversations, but thoughts here and how you can best play this map as a killer.
Azeroth's resting place is a great map when you look on the shape. I'm a fan of Azeroth's resting place, same as for Suffocation Pit. It offers these 3-gen setups, sometimes even a 4-gen setup if you are blessed with the DBD RNG, and it gives you all these resources you're looking out for, especially also as M1 killers. And then you have this bottleneck shape. We talked about it earlier when we were about how do you organize safe, how do you keep an eye as a killer on who is going in for a safe. So I think the killers will try to get usage of the advantage here the map layout is offering them. And I don't know, what do you think? Would you say the killer is trying to go for this classic 3-gen setup here, giving the map shape, or do you think we do see more an aggressive playstyle going for the first down regardless?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on the killer, right? And I think, if anything, we do see it down in that corrupt zone. That's where this game's really going to take shape, right? Where potentially that first down in the corrupt zone is going to result in, the killer being able to get 2 stages, theoretically speaking. So, depends on the layout. We do see here corrupt kind of being rather spread out and kind of a strange gen placement, right? That 3-gen on Shaq's side. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I was about to say, just when you mentioned it, if you load in with this corrupt setup here, it is giving you a little bit of a hard time straight from the start. We do see that there's another gen here towards the bottom, so maybe this is the side you want to play. You have to consider there's basement here as well. The gens are a bit spread, but maybe you can make use out of it. But we do see that Nia noticed this as well, and OFE is already aiming for the top side here, leading the killer far away from this setup.
Yeah, and a really good use of their exhaustion perk there. Try and make some distance. And as we talk about all the time when it comes to Oni, you want to deny that first hit as long as possible, because as long as you do that, they're just an M1 115 killer that you can kind of run non-stop.
Absolutely. We see the survivors doing a nice job here. They know about the strength of the main building, going for this straight at the start, going to try play this filler pallet here, dropping this early. Really like to see this play. They do seem to interrupt the survivor over here, but the survivor is aware of this. Seems like good communication here, leaving early, but this is going to be the first hit here onto OFE, as he was pretty much in the open. Good start now for the Oni, filling the power on 60% so far. And it seems like we do see the defending strategy here, trying to get some injuries across the board and stopping multiple generators.
Yeah, I mean, overall, good usage of their perks. We did see Tinker go off earlier, and we do see another one go off again. And we do know that Ruin is still up and running, as we did see that in that LT wall. But as we saw that, I'm sure the survivors did too. But Hammy here getting the hit and filling up their power, potentially getting between 1 to 2 downs if used right, and will get the Nia on the pallet.
The survivors, good for them that they got one of these generators here at the bottom side to break that setup, but the price is high. That is 2 generators in exchange for a first down, and the Oni senses that. He knows the survivors were grouped up together here. They do get rid of the Ruin now, but he knows someone is around. The survivor team now doing a good job staying stealthy, so not allowing a second down straight after Nia was put onto the floor. It seems like the Oni is now going for the pickup here, so a hook stage is coming in. I would say that we could potentially see another generator fairly soon.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We did see both those Tinker gens go off, and Oni is back to half of his power at this point in time, so good amount of pressure here. Only need to get another hit on a healthy survivor to activate Wrath at their leisure. It just now comes into consideration of what survivor do you want to go for? Do you want to press that second stage, or go for this down here on Adam, who kind of came out of nowhere, right? He's injured and not on gens, not getting healed, which you'd normally expect when you're playing against the Oni.
Absolutely, yeah, and we see a nice guiding of the hook now. He is trying to force the second stage here, potentially got the first down pretty early, has still the 3-gen setup down here, even though it is a more spread setup, has the basement. Maybe for him the plan, getting the survivors a bit more towards the bottom side, gaining advantage of the basement fairly soon. We do actually see that Nia is running down here, trying to play the Shack, a very safe tile, especially against an M1 killer. You said it earlier, Oni has the big disadvantage that he can be run for a long time, but if OFE would go down here, that would be a nice chance for the Oni to take over a lot more of the control. We do see that the survivors though finding a very nice reply to that, and this mind game is the victory for OFE here together with the next Tinker gen. But a nice down here now with the mind game on the Shack window there.
Yeah, no, amazing play by the Oni here, and that's actually going to allow him to put Nia down into the basement, which is going to be pretty significant, but looks like maybe they're looking around for a hook, not realizing basement's in that location, and so they will end up hooking outside by the crane. Not sure if this is strategic or a potential misplay by Hammy, but we do see scratch marks going over to middle as Hammy does activate their power and is going to try and go for another down.
Yeah, I agree on the hook there. I can understand why you pick the hook on the outside, as you want to be quicker in the gen defense there and not losing time by going up the basement staircase, but I think the basement would have been the stronger decision here, as it is deep in this gen setup. However, you do see the nice vault coming in here from Adam just in time, denying the down here. That looks like a good run by Adam. Nice rocket juke. Avoiding the down here. He will get grabbed now, but it is some additional seconds for the survivor team here. We see OFE is mended, so potentially the reset coming in. OFE will probably be placed on the top side now to work on the more safe generators, and that looks good for the survivor team so far. Another Tinker gen on the top side, the exchange with the deliverance, so very nice play here by Adam, getting himself back into the trial.
Yeah, amazing plays from these survivors so far, and utilizing pallets to their fullest, knowing full well that Oni's insta-down and insta-break will prioritize the pallet over the survivor, and great usage of the exhaustion perks again from the Nia, being able to really just kind of eke out some distance between them and the Oni. And, these survivors at this point, even though they do have this 3-gen on this side to worry about, I think they're still in a very strong position, knowing full well that Oni has no more gen regression to work with, and that at this point, they just take it nice and slow, and they have all the time in the world.
Absolutely, I agree, and we have seen one of the Tinkerers going off already. We do see some progress in the shack, as you say. The survivors absolutely working on this setup now, and it already done. I did not expect that. We were just talking about the setup here, and that the survivors can keep it slow, but the survivor team says, no, you know what? We are about to leave the trial as early as possible. A whiff coming out from the Oni. Nice play from the Claudette here. Talking about the end game here. What do you think? How many escapes will we see here against this Oni?
So that's the real question is, it depends on how much blood this Oni ends up using during this Wrath. Because if Oni's able to keep half and is able to get a potential down on a survivor, camp the hook, if a survivor comes in to try and get the unhook, they can potentially get their power and then snowball from there. So the smart play for these survivors will be to simply let that survivor go, but if Oni fatigues out and has no way to really reclaim their power, they're in a lot of trouble, and they just become that M1 115 killer that I don't think these survivors are going to be really worried about.
Absolutely, and Adam is playing this perfectly here. He managed to wait out the power, and now we are back to what you say. We do see the weak Oni just going after the survivors. Normal mind games again. Now no advantages available. Adam on an absolute nice run. We might even see one survivor coming in for a body block. They could give out 50% of power here as the Oni just ran out into the fatigue. But we do see the exit gate getting open, and I will agree with you that is going to be a 3-man escape here as you predicted.
Yeah, I think this is the smartest play by the survivors as a whole, and probably the best case scenario. But we did see, was that Hatch? Was that Hatch right there? I don't know if maybe the survivors caught a glimpse of that as they're running around, right now with the ability to, run over it and hit that hitbox. Maybe they called that out early to the Adam, and that's why he was over on this side of the map. But unfortunately, close is not close enough, and that will result Adam going onto hook and getting a hook plus progression for the Oni.
I have to say I'm happy for the Oni to take this kill here, because it kind of reflects the game we have seen here. We have seen a survivor team that played really organized, really having an idea on how to break this 3-gen on the shack side, but the Oni did a very good job in the early game, had a first down pretty quickly, got his power by nice mind games, for example on Shaq, nice downs coming in, so absolutely deserves this secured kill here in the end game. And it was a very nice match from both sides. We have seen some back and forth and some really, really nice ideas here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And with that being said, we are looking at 38 points for Monarchy to 19 points for the Oni. Definitely, a rough match for how do we get here starting off, but definitely not insurmountable as far as points are concerned as we go into Game 2 with Monarchy as the killer. So
yeah,
with that being said, we are going to be back on Azerov's resting place as of right now. If you're in the shoes of Monarchy, having double points of your opponent, they just brought in Oni, what would you respond in kind with?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I think they're going to play a killer that is able to keep the same control over a 3-gen here. You really want to see that you have a chance to secure enough hook stages to keep up the point difference at least. So 4 or 5 hook stages would probably be the goal. Then you're going extremely prepared into your upcoming matches. The confidence is high. You can say, hey, we played such a nice survivor game. This is now your chance. You get a nice 3-gen setup, use the map shape of ARP well, try to take advantage of your hook position, and then we will probably see a not so aggressive play style. We will probably see the first hook coming out secured into the second stage, taking some points and taking maybe a survivor out pretty early, and then trying to go from there to make sure they are taking the most of the point advantage they've just set up here.
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right with that, and it really is going to come down to who can play the 3-gen better between Hammy of How Do We Get Here from last match and Slow, who is going to be playing as Monarchy's killer here. I don't know. I know that you have a bit of familiarity with Slow from DBE, I do believe. So, do you have any, insights onto what they might be thinking of today?
So, he was requesting me to not reveal it early, but it is obvious. Everyone who knows Slow, right? He is known as the main for the M1 killers. Has a lot of experience here. I would expect him to bring either. I can imagine his Nemesis coming out here. I can imagine something going towards maybe a Huntress. Maybe we do see a killer who is working a little bit more with the distance, so when survivors are trying to run down, going for a reset, we could imagine, I could see him playing that as well, but if I have to guess, based on how I know his experience, I would predict that we will see his Nemesis, and he could really benefit here, as the zombies would offer some additional help maybe to keep that 3-gen alive you just mentioned.
Yeah, no, that actually is a really good point, and something that we do tend to forget about a lot when talking about the Nemesis is the information and passive gen pressure applied from the zombies. So that could be really important here if, in instance, they do bring Nemesis. Otherwise, it really is hard to say on this map because of it is so killer-sided. You really can kind of play around of who you will and will not bring. Obviously, certain killers do suffer a little bit on this map, but I mean, any 115 killer can run those 3-gens as long as you're getting those hits and, spacing out the pressure that those survivors apply.
Yeah, I agree. I agree on this one, and I think this is why. We have now both find good reasons for that pick, right? And I really think this is why he will pick the Nemesis as well. I could not imagine different. You mentioned really important the information as well, not only the interruption on the generators. Really like that point with the information there, and it is also something a survivor team needs to be aware about at the first place, right? Because you pretty often you see a zombie interrupting you at the generator and you're thinking like, okay, this is annoying now, someone needs to babysit the zombie, leading it away while a teammate is working on this. But the information you have, especially combined then with a ruin maybe that he would potentially be able to defend, that would be huge for him. Chaining the zombie pressure and the zombie information with the ruin undying, maybe the pick here could really be the combination for him to work with.
Yeah, especially if either Ruin or Undying does end up on the same side as the preferred 3-gen. I mean, that could spell disaster for these survivors if they are not able to play around that well.
Absolutely, yeah. And it will come down to the fact, I believe, that the survivor team needs to work. Like what we have seen against the Oni was pretty much the opposite, right? The team was keeping that 3-gen setup at the shack, and they used exactly what you mentioned when you said the Oni is weak and can be run for a very long time. They did not need to worry too much about this setup, and then you decide, now we are going all in. We saw the Tinkerer going off, we saw the Gen straight after, so they had time. On a Nemesis, I think the survivor team is forced to make the break of the 3-gen way earlier, and this could be the moment where Slow can have a stronger early game and then get the thing started.
Yeah, especially if they are able to advance to tier 2 very early. As we know, a auto-include for a lot of Nemesises are, add-ons like Marvin's Blood, where it's allowing you to progress even quicker than normal. Because without that tier 2, you really are just an M1 115 killer who can get hits over pouts or over vaults. But even that is, risky, as if they're not already infected, that anti-loop is really going to give those survivors additional distance. So there is that kind of counterplay that you have to keep in mind as well when it is, in regards to Nemesis.
Yeah, this taking out the resources is important though, and I think that comes down, the early game will be more important here as the mid game. If we see a Nemesis, we are almost 99% sure at this point that Snow will come in with a Nemesis. We all know him, but the early game will be the more deciding factor here than with the Oni, even because now we have on top of that not only that we are trying to get the power later, we have to break the 3-gen early on against the Nemesis to get things started, and if Slow is able to get a first down playing this well as the only last game, then I think there's a good chance for him to keep this point difference as they are right now in a very, very strong spot here.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. With that being said, kind of taking a step away from our next game, I know that Travis and I kind of talked a little bit about it last match, but I want to get your thoughts as well with the current PTB, the 5.3 update, available and played. Have you got any time to either look at it or play it? What are your thoughts there?
I have just looked at it so far, and have to say that I do like a lot of the changes when we are talking on the fun factor. For example, the nerf for the Spirit is something a lot of players will like to see. And I always say if you want to play competitive Dead by Daylight, you need to have fun in your normal matches. You need a good base for the game. You need to open Dead by Daylight and you need to enjoy it. And then you can decide to say, okay, now it's time for a team practice. Now it's time for scrimming. Let's show full potential. Let's show our performance here. And I think this patch was in some regards leading into more fun coming in for you looking at DBD as a base. You need to play competitive.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, and I definitely agree with you. When it comes to the average player's gameplay, I think that this is probably one of the best, patches or updates that Behavior has sent out in a very long while. With that being said, I am interested on the impact and implications that it also has for competitive play, of course. As you mentioned, Spirit getting that really light nerf. Do you think that when it comes to competitive play, that this might make Spirit less usable than she was prior?
From a first judgment, I would say yes, but looking at the add-ons and the ideas Behavior brought in there, for example, that you can immediately go back to where you have started the phase, it will be a very interesting add-on. And when I look, on the first look, it looks like Spirit got hugely nerfed even for competitive, and I do think she will be a little bit weaker than before. But looking on the Spirit players we have out there in the competitive scene, their knowledge, their game experience, their ideas, they're bringing up in form of mind games, the ideas they have to turn a match around, I think that these new mechanics, some of these add-ons are offering, are creating very individual gameplay, really interesting gameplay once you mastered it. And I also think that a very good Spirit with the top tier game sense will not really suffer from the still stand mind games that are not possible anymore, as they're having such a pool of experience to gain from. So Spirit has a very first judgment I would think is going to be the same. How do you feel about it? Would you say it? I don't want to see too positive on it. I also have to admit I don't have the most experience as a Spirit player myself. I always avoided playing her. Do you have any experience in that regards, or do you say she is significantly weaker than before?
I think the biggest thing to look at, I don't think that she is, nerfed to the point where she's F tier, B tier. I still think that she's arguably either A tier or S tier. But really quickly, you were right, as we are going to see Slow on some Nemesis. And already looking around real quick, and I don't know about you, but I see quite a number of totems.
That is true. That is a huge number of totems we do see when we look around the map, and we already see a first survivor too. So coming in with a lot of input from Haxes here, and that shows what we have predicted, right? You have mentioned the protection of the generators. We have talked about the 3-gen in the early game, and I think this perk build right there is really, really showing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we already see, as I mentioned, you know, Slow getting into tier 2 by utilizing things like Marvin's Blood. And so, you know, that is a huge place for Slow to be in right here from the start. You know, as we did get a bit distracted, and to answer your question, I feel like before, Spirit was always in the conversation as the best Dead by Daylight killer in the game. You know, arguments could be made that she was better than Nurse. I always would disagree with those, but it was an argument to be made. Well, with that being said, however, I will mention that was an insta-down on Ace, suggesting that the totem that did go off was a haunted ground. Speaking of the Spirit and her perks. So, quite surprised to see that, and that is a huge amount of value here from Haunted Ground on Slow, as they are now approaching that unhook, and could potentially get another down here, but Haunted Ground has expired. But I think now, with Nurse and Spirit, I think now Nurse is undoubtedly the best skill in the game. And because of that, I think that's the major change. I think that seats her in that position. I don't think there's any two ways about it. And I think that Spirit could arguably be now worse than Blight, just simply because of the amount of information that survivors get throughout the match.
I agree on that point, because the change was like the Nurse is so nice and also hated by some players because she's so strong based on her potential to end chases quickly, right? The Spirit was hated for being a guessing killer, and that creates not really a good amount of fun. And with that being gone now as well, I do agree. The Spirit is going to be a bit weaker, and I can see her below the Blight, as you mentioned. I agree there. Looking on the competitive Blights, all the techniques they're pulling up, from sliding techniques to J-flicks to all these crazy gameplay the Blight can create. And saying that, I am almost happy that this is going to change, because the Blight, same as Nurse, such a mechanical killer, coming down to so much skill that is visible for the competitive players, for the killer player, for the audience as well watching the stream. It is visible how the Nurse is acting, how the Blight is acting. That was always something I saw as a disadvantage in competitive, that his Spirit acted so much in the like unknown, and that you could not really see the skill that is coming out from a player. It was not that visible. And I think there's also a chance for competitive here, having Nurse and Blight now on these top two.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you on that. So it'll be interesting to see where Spirit kind of lands in competitive play. But I also want to bring up Slow and how efficiently he is dispatching these survivors, and how much info these zombies are actually giving him. You know, I think without the zombie there, it's possible that Slow may have not realized that they're going for the pickup, you know, over by the bus on Giraffe. And another haunted ground down here. I think this is a bit of a misplay on Survivor's side, as, you know, they already cleansed Undying the first time around. They already cleansed Ruin later down the road. And to be even more aggressive and to cleanse Haunted Ground a second time is a huge misplay. Granted, these survivors have now been able to reset and start to get back up. There's still some time left on that insta-down.
Yeah, I agree. There's a mistake that has been made by the survivors, because all perks have been available, right? The Undying can be called out, the Ruin is visible, the Haunted Ground is the perk that is left, and they might have hit Devour Hope there, as they couldn't maybe find the last dull totem, but then in this case you're trying to remember the totem location and go for it later on when the insta-downs would come through. So definitely agree here, and Slow is doing a phenomenal job punishing this from the survivors. We see hook stage number 6 coming out on 3 generators left. Even though his perks are now removed from the trial, we have seen this aggressive aggressive defending from the 3-gen from the start, and now he does not really go after this anymore. He doesn't need to, because he has so many injuries across, or had so many injuries across the board, got so much pressure from downing a survivor and keeping them stuck, forcing a rescuer or a healer coming over. Really, really strong performance here so far, and I think with seeing that, Slow will be able to play this out for a very, very strong result for Team Monarchy here.
And I definitely agree, and I kind of want to get into that when it comes to Nemesis used in comp. You know, you and I actually had a bit of a conversation prior to this match about Nemesis. You know, what are your thoughts? You know, I know in COTF, when we see Nemesis, most times it's kind of a bit meh. You know, as people have gotten to use Nemesis more and more and learn how to utilize the hitbox on the tentacle to its fullest, you know, we're starting to see some more, you know, testing on how good Nemesis is. What has been your experience in DBE with the Nemesis?
Yeah, in DBE, unfortunately, with the individual balancing, he did not get a shot yet. He was not in the pool for the October tournament. He would have gotten his chance in the November tournament, but now different rules, different killer pools, so Nemesis has to sit out until November. So I have to admit that we in DBE have never seen a Nemesis so far. I was only hearing some talks about it. I made some experiences in scrims when we were working towards the balance. This is my first time seeing a Nemesis in comp and seeing a very good Nemesis like Slow playing here. I do think that Nemesis has a very good chance to stand at least in the mid or higher in tier 8 competitive. He has a lot of potential.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. You know, when Nemesis first came out, a lot of people were not really high on him, mainly due to the fact that his initial tentacle strike doesn't really do much, and 9 times out of 10 actually gives survivors additional distance and pressure to work with. You know, but as we continue to see people utilize Nemesis more and more, and kind of figure out when to use the tentacle strike, when to not to do so, and how to best use it in certain scenarios, I think we'll definitely see him used in comp and could, you know, be comparable to killers like the Pyramid Head as far as anti-looping is concerned.
Absolutely, yeah, and we see it right here. That's a very good example. He forces these mind games similar to a Huntress, similar to a kind of also the Death Slingers, so really, really great to see that. And yeah, with that being said, also we have to consider that these mind games can be forced constantly, right? As soon as you do not need to reload and put up a hatchet, you do not suffer too much from a slowdown. By reloading your gun as the Death Slinger, the only point that could be really critical is when you go for the infection. The survivor makes a lot of distance that could be really punished by more experienced teams at the start and give you a hard time. But with these, the availability of the zombies, the information you mentioned earlier, really like that point. And seeing that he has his chase abilities all time together without suffering from reload time or anything else, I do think that Nemesis, especially when becoming more and more known and people are actively scrimming him, Nemesis could become a very, very dangerous killer to face in competitive Dead by Daylight.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And another thing to mention, and Nemesis kind of has a lot going from, you know, some shortfalls, but also some really huge benefits, because he also has probably arguably one of the best shred abilities in the game, where you're physically able to shred a pallet and continue to move. That's such a unique thing when it comes to killers in Dead by Daylight, because with that in mind, you're able to continue pressuring the survivor, whether that means, you know, ensuring that they're stuck in the loop that they're on, or potentially just making up distance as you go, right? So I think that's actually a huge thing that is rather overlooked, including the information from zombies. Though inconsistent, you know, there's a lot going for Nemesis if used correctly.
Yeah, that's a very good point you mentioned there, because I just realized about the pressure. It's a very good additional point here, as when we compare this to the Huntress or the Slinger, even though they have the ability to go over over the pallets, forcing mind games and being stronger, like for example a Trapper or a Wraith, they do suffer from one thing, and that is the moment when the Survivor said, okay, I forced him into breaking the pallet, I'm safe for now, I'm making distance to the next tile. And this is something the Nemesis also takes away. And we need to mention that this Survivor is escaping. What an endgame! What an endgame! This Steve with the last second escape. He is so close, but what a fight from Hammy here, who just played the Oni for his team. What a great end game here, and just how the Survivor team was fighting to the last second. Really amazing.
Yeah, no, really great job there. You know, I was kind of questioning, okay, how is Slow going to play this? What exactly is the play here? They were not really going out and checking other Exegate all too much. And I thought maybe Hammy was on the other side trying to 20% that Exegate and trying to do a silent open, but never expected them to do so on the Exegate that the Nemesis was actually nearby. That was quite the surprise, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Survivors here had a rough game, but they punished this. They made the right call in the end game. Really loved that, to see teams fighting to the last second, coming back from a difficult spot. Slow has taken control over the match almost the entire time. His perk plan worked out, his game plan on the generator setup worked out, and the Survivors are still saying, with all your resources, with everything you have tried to set up, this is not enough to stop us. We're gonna have an escape regardless. Amazing competitive play, amazing Dead by Daylight to watch, and that hypes even more to see the second set here.
Yeah, and I want to say a lot of people in chat are actually really surprised, because I was too. Initially, I was kind of looking at the Exegate being open. I was like, oh wow, you know, Hammy's using Wake Up. And then I looked at the end game and went, wait a second, there's no Wake Up. So that's what made me realize, oh, they did a silent open, they 20% of the gen whenever, you know, Nemesis would look away for just a moment. So, like, really good play there. And some of that I definitely was not expecting to see, because I fully expected, much like Slow did, much like Fenner's, you know, thought, that Wake Up wasn't in play because of how quickly that Exegate had opened, and it simply was because they are probably just chipping it away slowly but surely.
And Wake Up is, even though it was not in play here, Wake Up is a very good thing to mention, because this is something what I love so much about the DBD competitive scene. Would love to hear your opinion about this, but talking about Wake Up, talking about all these perks that are small, not used in normal games, everyone looking on those perks, saying, why should we take this in our online matches? This has no effect, or this is opening an exit gate a bit faster, or this is making a heal 10% faster. Why should we bring that? And then you watch DBD competitive, and some of these perks everyone is looking at and says, I would never bring that in any of my matches, is making the turnaround between two teams that are knowing what they are doing, and making the turnaround after a huge fight. So this is something I really love about these smaller perks and in DBD competitive, about their small effect. What do you like? And we hear a lot of discussion that behavior should buff the perks to bring them all into meta or give them a strong effect, and that's some examples where I say I disagree. Especially for competitive, because having some certain perks with such a specific effect that can make so much turnaround would be great to keep and great to have.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, you know, it's one of those things that because, you know, your average player doesn't consider it, but the comp player at higher level does, it does show that skill disparity almost between the average player and that top 5% MMR, which probably a lot of our comp players do end up in, right? So the question then becomes, you know, if they were to buff Wake Up, if they were to buff, let's say, Leader, what does that look like, right? And how does that then affect comp play on top of which? Because if they were to increase Wake Up by, let's say additional 5% speed on that Exegate, would that be too good for comp? And that's kind of an interesting thing when you kind of think about balancing for those perks like Leader, like Wake Up, that we see in comp play on the fringe, but actually have some really huge impact and implications if used the right way. And does that just tell you maybe the average survivor's just not skilled enough yet to use those perks so effectively? Maybe behavior might have to consider that before buffing it further.
I agree. That's a very nice point, because I think that brings us to the aspect what the normal, let's say normal players or casual players in online games oversee when we are talking about how bad certain perks are. Because in those moments when you have the correct survivor in the end game with a wake up, in reset moments when you have the correct survivor with desperate measures and botany knowledge, it shines, and then you see, wow, what a turnaround for the game. And when we look onto casual players, on online players that are giving feedback towards behavior, they do see the decisive strike, the unbreakable, what is obviously considered strong. And with that perspective, you say, this is too weak that I would take it. But then if you have a team, and this is the great thing about the competitive play, as we only allow one perk across the team, there you are forcing the teams to come up with something, to come up with combinations, as 4DH, 4DS will not be allowed. So would you think that could be maybe something to consider for the casual games too, that you, for example, join a lobby and it says there are too many decisive strikes, you need to equip a different perk, and if you don't do that, you get a randomized perk with you? Or would you say we need to make a split between fun game, 4 perks of everything allowed, and competitive with the rule set?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting thought, and it's funny that you mentioned that. I was actually thinking of the same exact thing, where it's like, what if you got into a match, you got into lobby, and then the first person in gets a pick? They get to pick the first perk. Then the second survivor in gets to pick the second perk, and so on and so forth. So you're almost picking your perks in the moment. And it almost reminds me of, League of Legends or Rainbow Six Siege, where you get to, pick who you're going to play as, and everyone can't play the same person, because if you could, that would be very overpowered in some ways. So that could be something that could be looked into. Do I think behavior would ever? Probably not. But do I think that would actually, create a better game and force the average casual player to maybe think about the game in a different light? Yes, and I think we're already seeing that in some ways with MMR, where people are having to realize, oh, based on MMR and where I'm placed, I'm having to play a different way. Unfortunately, it's working in the opposite way of what we would like to see. It's forcing the 4 DSs, 4 Unbreakables, 4 Dead Hards, and so on, right? Whereas, I think it could be shifted. That thought process could be shifted by putting more restrictions on what perks could be used in a match, or how many could be. It doesn't have to be every perk. If someone wants to bring 4 No Mythers, be my guest. But 4 DSs, 4 Unbreakables, 4 BTs, well, it's pretty strong, especially around a coordinated survivor team.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really I like the idea of the ban system or pick and ban system from Rainbow Six Siege and other games, where one survivor picks first and they're rotating around. And as I don't think it would be even have too much impact on the match, as most of the time survivors are not readying up immediately, and we wait 60 seconds anyways, right? Yep. And everyone will, with getting used to it, everyone will start developing an idea, okay, if my decisive strike gets picked, what do I take as an alternative then? So it would be fine if they would make sure that there's a fair order of, I'm picking this time the last, next time I'm picking the first. Could be a really, really interesting system, but I do agree with your point. I don't think that we will see that, as it would be a big change, and as I have seen behavior, they are trying to be careful with big changes for the more casual community.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. But with that being said, we are in the match on Blood Lodge now, OFE on Killer, and they are playing as the Doctor. I mean, they have a substantial lead right now. We did not mention it before, but there's a 50-point difference between Monarchy and How Do We Get Here at this moment in time. So Monarchy definitely has a little bit of slack to work with and take it a little bit more easy. Doctor on this map is a little bit interesting. It's a bit of a bigger map, of course, and the tiles are kind of moved a fair distance away. What are your thoughts on Doctor at this current point in time in comp play?
Doctor is an interesting character. You do profit from some information, even though we do see OFE going very aggressively for the first down here, not really looking into the survivors, and we do see that someone is leaving the trial now, so I need to give back the question real quick. What happens with this survivor?
Yep, so because we do see that happen within the first 2 minutes, as Corrupt Invention has not ended yet, this survivor team does have the option for a reset if there was an internet issue. Just trying to keep it fair because, on 4 gens, survivors having only 3 left can be a little bit rough. Hard to say whether or not that could be internet or, behavior being behavior. But it looks like it was due to a disconnection, so we can reset here. And looks like we'll be doing so in just a few moments. I'll let the survivors know that they are good to DC.
Yeah, that's very unfortunate here for our survival team, but it is what the comp community has to work with, right? And what we have to work with as hosts, as staff. There are some bugs in the game. We do discover some bugs after updates. We need to rebalance things or ban certain things after things are appearing in the game. So it is... the community is used to it, and as far as I notice, teams are very cooperative always when it comes to issues and going for a restart, because we're all sitting in the same boat, right? Next match, you're gonna be the one who is getting disconnected, and you would like to see your survivor team being reset. So it's unfortunate that we lost the survivor here, but that is something we need to work with when we are planning to set up DBD competitive and watching DBD competitive.
Yeah, no, it is one of those things, especially where, where this is something that is not yet developer supported. There is no ranked setup. This is still something that, as you and I very much know, is a community-focused things. And with that being said, issues do arise, and obviously in this case where the match is very much one-sided as of this moment, there's not a lot of pressure on the killer and on the survivors. But it does appear that we'll be restarting here in just a few moments, and this will give the opportunity for both the killer and survivors to change builds as necessary. Obviously, I want to give the killer especially that ability to do so, given that, I feel like survivors, you can kind of guess what all 16 perks are if you rattle them off real quick, your BTs, DSs, Unbreakable Deliverance, and so on. With Killer, though, it's a bit more restricted, especially around the killer's power. So I would not be surprised here if, OFE will change off of Doctor onto someone else.
Would be very interesting to see, though, if they're bringing a different killer. I think we do have seen what the game plan is. They went... After the first survivor, whatever happens, they did not look left and right, checking the perks, checking the generators, which makes a lot of sense. You said 50-point lead. This is your killer game to set up your survivor team for the last trial. You want to make sure that you get a good result now, and that you kind of set up your survivor team maybe into a spot where they just need to complete generators, right? That is potentially the best feeling you can have when you're going as a survivor team into the last trial, and the win condition is, okay guys, we just need so and so many gens, we do not need any escape.
Yep, no, exactly. And that's kind of one of the... It's very... freeing is the best word that I can say, especially when you have that lead going into Game 4, because I want to say, I don't know if it's the same thing of DBE, but here we always say that Game 3 really is the determining game. Game 1 sets the tone, but Game 3 usually is what determines the outcome of the match, because it's either going to be the team with the lead is going to extend their lead and be to the point where they cannot, lose, or it's going to be where that team that might be just a little bit behind might bridge that gap, and Game 4 becomes this really tense and, the most important match of the game. Is that what you see in DBE as well?
That is something we do notice, yeah. It comes down to especially in the first rounds, we do see that matches are either very, very close, but then every single match before has been really, really close, or we do see that one team is taking the lead, and game 3 is also there, the big decision maker, because when a team is going into the last match being able to say, okay, it goes both ways, right? When the survivor team can say, we just need 3, 4, 5 gens, we do not need to worry about an end game, especially with 3 gens only. We do not even need to worry about a 3-gen setup that is almost impossible to stop, and the game is already decided. Same if the killer is going in and knows, okay, based on my point lead, I just need 1 survivor dead. You see one chase being one survivor being highly targeted. We see the face cam coming out, the kill is secured, and there's almost nothing the survivor team can do anymore, as even a trade would lead into these hook stages the killer needs. So I can sign this 100%. Game 3 is a big deciding factor. We have seen OFE's plan straight after Survivor, getting the first Survivor out of the game as soon as possible to set up the Survivor match in game number 4. And based on that, my prediction is going to be we see Doctor again, and I will also predict that we see the same perk build again. So what's your guess?
Yeah, I think honestly, as much as the surprise factor is always nice, especially in comp on like pubs, the surprise factor is really a bit less impactful. Where I think, having that notion of who the killer is going to be is a lot less important than many might think. Obviously, as we saw a lot of totems that last match, maybe some changes here and there on the perks. When you see that many totems, and obviously Sapphire saw that Haunted Ground was used that last match, it is potential that they might change that up just a little bit to ensure that, Survivors aren't playing as carefully around totems. Or maybe, you still have that, and there's a little bit of a mind game there, a bit of metagaming, thinking, okay, well, Survivors know I have Haunted, or they're going to be more careful on those totems, and maybe not run Haunted Ground instead.
That is true. Yeah, we could see potentially maybe a Devour Hope coming in to trick them a bit. To have like an additional hex, and then the survivors are like, oh, that is going to be the haunted. That's actually nice, because you are now in the place as the killer where you can nearly go for some mind games, right? With the hex totems especially.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's definitely something that you don't think about as much, having mind games outside of the game. But there really is some, thought that has to go into not just on Haunted Ground or not to use Haunted Ground, but also to ensure that something happened, I do believe, as I'm not able to spectate, but it does kind of make you think about, when survivors change builds, right? Whether or not they, move Deliverance around, DS around, Unbreakable around, because there are those key perks that on Survivor Tide 2 that you need to think of, you just keep the same build. And I think a lot of teams do that, but I feel like there's always those starters. You know who I'm talking about? The ones that always have Deliverance that first game.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. You can tell by certain plays what the Survivor team is planning, and then setting up a very good counter. I can tell a little bit talking about my own team, and especially back in the days when I played comp and wasn't hosting yet. Sometimes when a restart happened, we did type into the chat, give us 2 minutes to change perks.
Yep.
And then we were taking time, slowly readying up, and in fact we didn't change anything. And just going for this mind game of like, okay, and then we were sitting in the voice chat and saying like, okay, how long would we take if we changed something? And then we wrote like another message saying 30 more seconds, we are nearly done. And the killer was like thinking we changed a lot, but in fact we were loading in with the exact same builds as we originally planned. So there's some mind games possible in these breaks, and it is also it also like, especially on closer games, but even now, teams need to really stay in the focus, right? You had a good start and you're in a good position. You are ready to play your doctor, but now you need to make sure the focus is set. The survivor team has some more moments to sort themselves, discuss the game plan one more time. So having a break like this is not only break, it offers a lot of potential for both sides.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And it looks like DBD decided to be DBD, and even though the map had not changed, it actually sent them to Haddonfield that last reset. So you know, things happen. That's what happens when we don't have any comp-specific support. To be fair, behavior actually has not touched Kill Your Friends or what was previously, or I guess now is customs. In quite a long time. I think the last time they changed it was that name change. Here's a question for you, and I'm kind of curious on this. What are your thoughts on seeded maps eventually? Do you think that could be something that we see in Dead by Daylight for comp play, where we have seeded maps where generators spawn in certain locations, where hooks spawn in certain locations? And if we do, is that something that you want in comp play?
I would be just happy if that comes, because I believe at this point, like, there's a reason why Dead by Daylight has not been that focused as an esports game yet, such as Counter-Strike, Valorant, and other games. Of course, the player base is smaller and the game is smaller itself, but in a game like Counter-Strike, one of the esports, it comes down to who aims better, who is faster in reaction time, who has the better tactic. And this is what makes it skillful, and this is what we want to see when we talk about competitive DBD. Right now, we do see some hits being decided by ping, by hitboxes, that is okay. And sometimes we can finish a match and we can say this team lost to a 3-gen setup, a 4-gen setup, sometimes a 5-gen setup. If we talk about Suffocation Pit main building, there's sometimes a 5-gen and the other team gets a 3-gen, especially on a killer like Trapper, the weaker ones. But even with the Nurse, it creates two so different games, and I think this is taking some sense and some core from what we would call competitive esports, what we would call skill-based esports, and map seeding would allow us to remove this factor of having this RNG, but also imagine you would be able to plan the map prior to a tournament and send it to the teams 2 or 3 weeks before and say, this is going to be your map. Can you imagine how many tactical plans would come out in this time when all these great hats are sitting together and thinking about their tactic for the upcoming matches?
Yeah, no, that is a big factor of that, and why I'd love to eventually see that. I mean, it's funny that you mentioned that 3, 4, even 5-gen. I was scrimming with my team, and funny enough, I actually got a 6-gen. And I joke you not about that.
Wow.
It was on Gas Evan, and Lawyer had 2 back-to-back 3-gens. And I remember hooking a survivor in my 3-gen where I could sit at the hook, I could see my 3-gen on that one, and I looked around and I went, oh, I'm a Bubba. I'm not going to leave this. And so I just sat there on the hook. Sorry, I was going to do anything. I chased him off the gens. And then I hooked the next person, looked around. It was a different position. I saw, oh, I have another 3-gen. And they're literally next to each other on one side of the map. I'm like, man, if I could ever get this in a comp game, I would be so happy.
It sounds huge. Yeah, if you load in with that setup, then you're then you don't need an early down anymore, right? Then you have the confidence straight from the start.
Exactly.
That is amazing. And talking of amazing, I think OFE is also doing very amazing here at the start of the game, getting the first down while still having 5 generators up.
Yeah, this is very almost identical, if not reminiscent, of that first match that we did reset, where we see that first down before Corruption Invention is over. And though we did hear one totem go off, we do see that Ruin is still active. So really, really strong start by OFE here, and really putting the pressure here on these survivors.
Very, very nice play by him, Corrupt. Still not expired, and we see the same. OFE is playing very aggressively, going for these downs, trying to tunnel out the ace now. Actually switching now. Having a look on the generators, nice decision though. We do hear another hex going off in the distance, so good job by the Survivor team too. As we said before, match number 3 is very deciding, so the killer is trying to set up the Survivor team. The Survivor team is trying to pull out almost the last chance to make a big turn here, or a big impact into the score. Nice shock, but judging the start here, OFE, with the confidence his team has given him into the back, looks like a very, very great performance.
Yeah, I mean, that was an amazing shock. Honestly, I wasn't sure that was actually going to connect in time before that vault, but it did, and so really good hit there. You know, and a lot of people do forget, especially when they haven't played a lot of comp play. If you get a hit on Survivor and they are able to escape chase and you go back and kick a gen, you know, that's still 16 seconds of time for a heal if they haven't found another Survivor with a heal-based perk. So really strong to just sometimes get that hit and walk it back and, you know, go do something else and let Survivors waste time doing, you know, heals.
Yeah, especially as an M1 killer, the core in DBD is time, right? I absolutely agree. It's a great strategy to run just a hit and then leaving, and we do see OFE just securing some stages here. Also knows that the survivors are around here. 2 survivors are located, so that leaves only the Claudette on a generator right now, and OFE has no reason right now to leave this area.
So I actually have a question for you based on what we're seeing here. You know, I refer to this as shock lock, where you have the add-on to reduce the time necessary for your shock therapy. So what are your thoughts on these type of add-ons in Dead by Daylight, and especially in competitive play? You know, Doctor is probably the only killer that can theoretically deny an unhook in this manner and pretty much force a second stage no matter the circumstance. You know, are these things that we want to see tuned in competitive play? Or do you think this, especially for Doctor, who is a weaker M1 killer base kit, you know, really needs that advantage in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, I think the add-on on Doctor is fine, because we kind of need this lower delay for the chase potential, right? We do see nearly every Doctor picking this add-on, and we cannot make a difference if there's this delay on a pallet run or on the unhook. So we kind of need to allow it. I sometimes, like especially here where the hook was, it was a very interesting location, as the hook was very like guarded from walls and really difficult to play for survivors. So they didn't really have so much of a chance to avoid the shock. Then setting up the double save, it's really difficult in this specific spot here. And if OFE chose this hook there, knowing that and keeping that add-on effect in mind, then I have to say it was a very, very nice decision to see. We all see in general here that he is doing really, really great as a Doctor. I do think this add-on is fine, considering also that a first down should not happen as early as we've seen this game, and if you get the down on like 3 generators left, 2 generators left, and the Doctor is busy staying on the hook and denying these unhooks constantly, that should be the other 2 survivors almost being nearly done with the generators. So this add-on, in my opinion, comes into play when the survivor team allows a hook too early, and then they kind of suffer from this add-on, and then it is definitely very strong. But I think the killer at this point, if they're able to put themselves in this position, they deserve, looking into the weakness of the Doctor, as you mentioned, the Doctor kind of deserves this effect on his side.
No, I agree with that. You know, it definitely is miserable when you are the survivor in that situation. But fact of the matter is that the major reason why I don't like Doctor where he is right now is because base kit wise, he really does suffer without, you know, these 2 add-ons, without an electrode, without the shock therapy delay. Because otherwise, you know, you're just not getting value unless it's on filler tiles, and which at that point, you know, they're not horribly safe as is. So there is that kind of give and take. And so, you know, as we've seen some buffs to Plague, some nerfs to Spirit, some buffs to the Trappers, I'd love to eventually have Behavior look at Doctor. What are your thoughts on that?
So for the plague, I have to say real quick, there was this one change where I was not really happy with. I was talking to known plague players. This change that you cannot charge too short, right? And
Yep.
like this issue where you charge and then she doesn't puke. Like I fear that the developers are considering this buffing the plague and making it easier to play her along with the add-ons. And there I have to say, for competitive play, she's still very weak, and
Yep.
it doesn't. A longer infection time doesn't come into play. The survivors are just going on gens and smashing through everything, so the longer infection time doesn't really hurt them. The strongest add-on will still be the effectiveness, together with a lot of plagues are using the faster charging speed, and this add-on was actually nerfed, I believe, by 50%. And the fact that they are allowing the plague to not have this issue anymore that you puke too shortly, a competitive plague that is having a ton of experience would never make this mistake. A competitive plague would never charge too low to not puke, and this was something where I was with a competitive mindset looking onto plague and was like, considering they consider this as part of the buff, they potentially don't touch plague for a long time now. And that made me a bit sad when I'm looking onto plague for competitive.
Yeah, no, that is a fair point, and we've seen that a lot of times where behavior kind of touches a killer, edits their add-ons, reworks them, what have you, and we see them kind of do a quick touch, and then kind of doesn't touch them again for 6 months, a year, 2 years. And it's probably because they're collecting data on, did these changes make a difference? And if yes, okay, what does that mean? Do we need to tune them again? Or do we need to make them better, make them worse? Is this overperforming? And so it will be interesting to see if we do see any plague changes again in the future. Or, even if in the next 2-3 years.
I would love to see this. Maybe they could implement something that an additional infection over time does lead into her power without survivors cleansing. So if survivors decide to stay infected for a long time, that you still have a chance to somewhat get your power, because plague is a very unique killer in terms of you only get access to your full power if the survivors decide something to do. And that is the only time. A huntress is reloading and going in. A slinger is reloading, going in. A doctor has his shocks. A nemesis, the zombies and the tentacle, and he can get his power. But the plague is limited by 50% of her power resources based on what are the survivors trying to do, and I think that is some part of why she is weak as she is, because you're depending on your opponent's side to show your full potential, and I don't feel like that is completely fair to her.
No, I 100% agree, and kind of going back to Doctor real quick, I have to say of OFE, really good, strong plays here. I do want to note, though, these survivors definitely not taking this down line, as we do have them on 4 gens completed right now, even if these last 2 survivors are currently on Death Hook. So I think, for all of Doctor's shortcomings with these 2 add-ons being used, and OFE making amazing use of things like his shock therapy for that anti-loop and for static blast for information, really has had a amazing showing with the Doctor here.
Absolutely, he used the power so well. He knows these mind games. We just see it right here. Shocking, forcing the survivor into a vault. He knows what he's doing. He's able to block the hook. Still thinking about the fact if he chose the hook earlier, knowing that the survivors have a hard time dodging the shock attacks. We can almost upload this game and declare it as a Doctor tutorial. It was perfect. Like, this is how you play Doctor. The timing's perfect. The mind game's on point. Really great performance by OFE here.
No, I 110% agree. And if that being said, that there was the nail in the coffin for how do we get here. You know, as we mentioned before, Game 3 is so important when it comes to, you know, competitive play. And with that being said, we are looking at 126 points to Monarchy, to 45 points to how do we get here. So, you know, this does mean that How Do We Get Here is unable to win, though you'll still be going into game number 4, and sometimes, you know, as much as it is disappointing not to see, you know, a really intense game 4, I sometimes love when it is, you know, decided by game 4, because that means that we sometimes get to see killers that we normally wouldn't otherwise. We get to see trappers, we get to see legions come in. So, you know, if you had to choose a killer that you never see in comp, for game number 4, for How Do We Get Here, what would you like to see?
Who do I would like to see? A Legion would be great. I've seen one Legion in DBE one time, and it was interesting to watch. It was a very experienced Legion, going for nice decisions. A Legion would be great. I always love to see a Death Slinger, especially when we see some snipes. Amazing gameplay. Maybe we could even see something stealthy, a Myers, a ghost face, something like this would be huge to see. But I absolutely agree. Game number 4, even if it's decided, offers so much potential for the teams to test something, to try out a perk build or a new strategy. So it's always amazing to see. And with the pressure gone, very interesting things can happen. So game number 4. After the decision in game number 3, game number 4 has a lot of surprises sometimes. So I'm very hyped to see what they are actually bringing out here.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. So, you know, personally, I would definitely love to see more Legion play. And I know that you also mentioned Slinger. With Death Slinger, I actually have a question for you. You know, obviously we talked about Plague a little bit. We talked about Spirit. What are your thoughts with the Slinger changes? Obviously, when it came to, like, the top 10 killers, Slinger and Huntress were always kind of on the fringe of, you know, how usable or how valuable they were in comp play. And Slinger in the right hands could be really strong. But with this nerf, do you think it's going to be significant enough where we see less Slingers in Dead by Daylight competitive play?
I do believe so, especially when hearing the opinion of some Slingers, because this ability to fake the shots, and it can be compared to, like, the Huntress is raising her headshot, and it is a 100% guessing from now when will she release the headshot. And with the Slinger being able to fake the shots, it was all time the gamble: is he shooting now or not? There's still the quick shot possible, the insta shot, but I think for Slinger it does take a lot out of his resources, that we are not able to fake the shots anymore that quickly. And I can 100% understand behavior there. I can understand why they say the spamming of M2 is nothing we want to see in normal matches. Yep. I can see why players complained about this, and from a perspective of behavior I understand the nerf. But on Slinger, I have to say that this was a change I did not like to see. I really did not like to see the changes. I think Slinger was, as you mentioned, in very nice state. He was able to be absolutely dangerous, but against an experienced team there was still enough counterplay and enough resources. What I'm also worried about is the bigger terror radius, as Slinger had the ability to sneak up to someone, or somehow sneak up to someone, and then get potential to snipe someone from a generator or something. This will now be gone with the bigger terror radius. So how do you think... it's also interesting, right? Because Slinger will be the only 4.4 killer with the normal 32 meters terror radius.
That is actually a really good point, and that's probably my biggest complaint in all of this, is that they said Slinger's the only ranged killer who does not have a lullaby. And technically true, you know, Huntress has a 45 meter lullaby range and a 20 meter terror radius. Trickster has a 32 meter Actually, the 32 is a 24-meter tear. It's 24-meter tear radius with a 32-meter lullaby. You normally will hear it at max volume at 32 meters. It's a very strange way that Trickster's lullaby range works. It basically is kind of like a bell curve. As you get farther away or closer, it starts to become quieter and quieter, and only maxes out at like 32 to 24 meters. But with Slinger, I would have actually loved for them to keep him at a 24-meter tear radius, or even bump him down to 20-meter tear radius, and give him a lullaby. Give him a lullaby like Huntress, to where, you know, you don't know his directionality, because the biggest reason why people ran Monitor Abuse in the first place is because they wanted to be as close to the survivors as possible in order to get that shot off. And now, it's almost like before, you wanted Monitor Abuse, now you need it. I feel like if you leave him at 32 meters, Slinger's just going to be so heavily punished as a 110 killer with range, because now you need an additional, it moves from 32 to 18 meters, so you need additional 14 meters of distance on the survivor before you can try and get a shot off.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting point, because Monitor and Abuse is basically what you need to run to get your normal Slinger experience back. Yep. And that takes a perk slot, right? How do you replace that? You need your Corrupt. You probably want to bring your Ruin and Pop, maybe Undying, maybe a Tinker, maybe a Thanatophobia, and replacing one of these with Monitor and Abuse will be something that damage him. Like, then you have your normal Slinger back, but you play him with 3 perks from now. So that is basically a big nerf for competitive 2. And knowing the strategy survivors are putting up is, especially against 4.4 killers, holding W, making distance to raise time. Now with the 32 meters terrors, I think this could really, really, really damage him.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that I'd like to see change from the PTB2 Live is definitely, definitely a change back in the terror radius, or just an application of a lullaby. I'm not sure how it worked, and I'm actually being told that potentially, and I have to do more research, because actually I didn't realize that Trickster's terror radius was as wonky as it was, or rather as lullaby, but apparently it also might be based on line of sight, where Huntress has a lullaby, and it's just simply basically a pseudo tear radius, right, at 45 meters, which is, for all intent and purpose, the largest quote-unquote tear radius that is in the game, killer-wise. So I would love to see maybe a bit more consistency with killers, with lullabies, and either changing what Huntress's is, or making what Huntress has, the same on every other range-based killers. Do you think that would be beneficial for killers like Slinger, like Trickster, to have that lullaby or pseudo-tear radius of sorts?
I would say so, and I think it benefits the game in general, because we do not only need to look on competitive. Imagine you are bringing a new friend into the game, and you have to explain the logic of Heartbeat and Lullaby for 4 different killers, how they work. Like you mentioned, the bell curve for the Trickster, there you need to explain that a reduced sound is this in this distance, and then on a Huntress, you almost have it's getting louder as close as she is. On a Slinger, you need to explain there is none. So I do not see a reason why there is the inconsistency you mentioned. I think from a game design perspective, it makes also no sense, because we see behavior aiming towards a clearer tutorial. We see behavior aiming towards making things easier for newer players, with a lot of additional descriptions and advices for newer players, and then creating 4 different or slightly different mechanics for this same sort of killer does not seem sensible to me from a game designer perspective. So even for casual gamers, I do not really see the reason there. But I think the lullaby, as you said, like, the principle, what they have is fine. The logic is fine. I do think what they started with, the Huntress, is okay. What they have, there's no reason to bring the Slinger out of line. And same as you, I'm worried to have a 32 meters tear radius, and I'm gonna be with you. If we have to pick one thing that we want to see changed, from the PTB, I would be with you and say, please adjust the terror radius for our Slinger.
Yeah, I'd agree. We haven't touched on boon totems at all. I imagine this is something that your team is already, you know, already discussing, right? What is DBE's stance right now on boon totems, at least at a glance?
So DBE pretty much everything that is coming new into the game is getting straight up banned for some time. Same probably with the new build to last. It will just be banned for the start. We want some time to see scrims. We want some time to hear opinions from players. And I think the worst thing you can go for is experimenting mid-tournament or bringing in new perks and say like, okay, we have boon totems because that's huge, right? It's not a perk coming in with effects, it's a new mechanic that can be used. And so not 100% confirmed yet, but I'm pretty sure DBE is just going to go for a ban, probably for 1 or 2 months at least, to see how it's going to work out. And then we need to look into this. From a very first judgment, I do see that the healing boon is being banned from the M1 killers. I do not want to imagine playing in M1 Evan, having my 3-gen on the top side and the survivors are resetting with 90% or however it is speed at the shack side, and you can never leave your 3-gen setup. So against M1 killers, I can see the heal perk being banned. We have a closer look right now. I'm worried for the M1 killers, I have to say. I do think that boon totems that can just be replaced by the survivors over and over, and the killer has to leave the gen setup, going to the totem, stomping it out, and the survivors are just able to return to the totem and bring the effect back, seems to me to, just overly strong, especially against M1 killers.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, and that's a lot of my concerns right now as well. I mean, if we're kind of looking at the match at hand and we kind of envision what the game would look like if a circle of healing was allowed, you know, the fact that theoretically you can set up a circle of healing at a gen that's already been completed, and that allows for these survivors to simply disengage chase and then go over to that location and heal at 100% speed. It's basically as if you brought self-care for 3 other teammates, right? And I think the biggest thing, as I kind of mentioned in a prior match, is if an instance a survivor, you know, let's say that Nia were to place a boon totem, and you were having to take that in consideration as a killer, you know, the fact that you can only snuff it out and they can reapply it is a huge, huge thing, because there's all reward and no risk, versus if you were able to, as a killer, destroy that totem in full and make it so that, you know, that totem then exited the game when it was snuffed out, would probably be smarter. And I hope that's one of the major changes to boon totems, where I could see boon totems being allowed into Season 2 of COTF to see how it works and see if it is too powerful or not. But, you know, time will tell, right? Time will tell whether or not boon totems are too strong, depending on the change that behavior does or does not make. But I think you and I can both agree, Commodious Toolbox, or any form of toolbox with the Built to Last and Streetwise, is a little bit strong, the new Built to Last.
Yeah. Yeah, that is, especially with the now 99, 66, and 33, so you can basically get your toolbox back 2 additional times. That is something that is going to be huge, not only because people have already calculated the times. I've seen tables being sent to me that is actually showing that on a brown toolbox there's no additional time saved.
Yep.
But it comes down still to the fact that there are moments, critical moments in the match, where you want to break a 3-gen setup, and you need these additional 1 or 2 seconds that your toolbox offers there. And having the chance to try to break the 3-gen once with the toolbox, being interrupted by the killer, going into a locker and returning with a full brown toolbox to break the 3-gen setup potentially again 2 or 3 seconds faster, that is still something you need to consider. And then it doesn't really, like, then the argument that it takes additional seconds to be in that locker does not clear the case by 100%, because maybe the advantage of having a toolbox back to break the 3-gen setup is something the survivors profit way more from. Do you have ideas yet here? Will you allow build to last immediately? Because that's actually a perk I'm really unsure about.
Yeah, because, I mean, once again, as we kind of talked about boon totems in the essence of how it would look like in this game, as you actually mentioned, we see this 3-gen here. It's kind of a loose 3-gen, but close enough for this clown to kind of work with. And so, you know, as we imagine that toolbox for Adam already being spent, imagine if he was able to get that yellow toolbox with scraps and the wire spool back with, let's say, Streetwise. You know, that is a lot of time saved, and, you know, I've done the breakdown for Commodious, and Commodious toolbox with those and Streetwise is utterly insane. Obviously, in comp, we're usually looking at that yellow or brown toolbox, and just in these slight moments where those little seconds add up so quickly, as we see Adam kind of gen tap, run away, come back, tap to gen again, you know, it can be quite significant in the long run. And especially with how efficient, you know, our competitive survivors can be. So at first glance, I'm kind of looking at it and evaluating the amount of time saved over, you know, the yellow toolboxes with Streetwise and Built to Last. As of this moment, I think as is, I'm pretty sure Built to Last is probably going to be banned from Season 2 of, actually, from the remainder of Season 1 come October 19th of COTF.
Yeah, it's an understandable decision because we see how this clown is in this match doing a really good job trying to defend his 3-gen here, and he is on edge, right? The survivors are doing a wonderful job leaving the gens early. The clown can do nothing else than just taking time to chase them. He does get it down now in the 3-gen, but bringing a toolbox back by Build to Last almost fully filled would be just huge, especially against those killers. We do see it here perfectly, the survivor, how early he left. Perfectly played from the survivor team, and now going into a locker over there, coming back with a full toolbox that just seems, as a very first judgment, insanely strong.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the progress that Jen had before that pop, imagine that, you know, they had that full toolbox again. I think at this point that Jen would have been done for and would have put the clown into a losing position, where right now, with pop, they still have that ability to potentially bring this game back if they play right. Is it difficult? Is it, you know, for all intents and purposes, insurmountable odds? Absolutely, but, you know, it's not outside the realm of possibility as long as they play efficiently, and the survivors make a few mistakes here and there.
That is true, yeah. And I have to mention Clown. With this 3-gen, we said it's kind of spread, but possible to work with. He's playing this very, very great. He has 2 hook stages. That is not the issue of the Clown player. That is just the ability of the Clown. He is one of the weakest killers. Very nice tactical play and very nice ideas to keep the generators together. Now they do get it done though. There's nothing he can do, but it was a very, very nice attempt by the Clown. We've seen a lot of ideas, and taking this down here towards the end is kind of rewarding that. And yeah, Clown would be actually a killer too, where I wish they would look into more.
Yeah, I will say when they reworked Clown and gave him the invigoration bottles, I was definitely a little bit high on him and thought, okay, this is actually a really good change. He feels better, but he's still not there yet. He's still an M1 115 with some anti-loop. And yeah, with the invigoration bottles and the intoxication bottles used in tandem, you can get some really, really amazing plays. At the same time, is it enough to really put Clown on the same level as other killers in his class? And the answer is probably not, no.
Something I would love to see on the Clown is that they split the pink and yellow bottles. So you have 5 of your pink bottles and you have 5 of your yellow ones. And when you reload all of them. So you are not limited. Like, if you give yourself a speed boost, you are at the same time already taking your power kind of away, because a pink bottle. So splitting this would be nice, and I think they could use the yellow smoke more. For example, imagine you are throwing a yellow bottle on a pallet, and it takes it's a toxic effect onto the pallet, and it takes 2 seconds or 1 second, and the pallet breaks when the pallet is in the yellow smoke. There could be some more effects they could add to this yellow smoke, and then having the yellow bottles as an own resource. This could make him a little bit stronger, maybe, would be something to be tested. But a big issue right now for me is that whenever you make yourself a bit quicker with the yellow bottles, you're taking your own power away for the chases.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good point. And, we definitely have seen throughout this match, Denzophage, consistently using their yellow invigoration bottles to their advantage to try and traverse this map. And we do see them here on the ace trying to secure this last down. Denzophage, even with the odds stacked against them, not giving up in the slightest, even if the 3-man out here, and does end up getting the ace. But like that's actually a really interesting thing that I had not personally thought of. And I think that change would actually really help Clown improve, because that's twice the number of bottles that they normally have, and would allow them to use them more efficiently, because 9 times out of 10 you're using your intoxication to slow down the loop, but you want that invigoration as well to try and traverse the map, or even quicken yourself to be on top of that survivor even more so.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's just one idea they could look. I do fear that Clown is also not being touched for a long time now, as they considered him being buffed. This is my worry about Plague as well. And yeah, so I wish they... I have some hope, as they said in the developer update of the MMR, they are gonna go... they are gonna go to use the MMR to make better decisions in the balancing, right? To see the top players. So that is my hope for the next weeks and months, that they are now taking effect and look into MMR plays, and then we see some very nice decisions coming in for competitive, especially.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But that being said, that there is the match. Once again, congratulations to Monarchy, who ended up with 164 points. And GG's well played to have to get here at 67. So definitely, at the end, a pretty one-sided match, but both teams put all the effort they had into it. And, I always want to remind, How Do We Get Here is a newer team to competitive play, and I do love to see how they are continuing to grow as a team. So once again, GG's well played to them.
Absolutely. Love to see newer teams, love to see new faces coming into competitive. We need that. We need new teams, we need new faces, we need new ideas in the gameplay. We have to say they have given everything, and that is what matters. They have presented themselves perfectly, have played until the end, have shown a nice end game in that Nemesis match, getting the survivor out. So fighting their best, fighting to the end. It was amazing to watch, and they can be proud. Congratulations to the winning team tonight. GG's to the losing team. It was amazing. Just very, very great match to watch.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But with that being said, we will be ending this stream here. We do have another match going on. It's going to be a little bit delayed. Both teams agreed to a slight delay. I believe we'll be starting at around 6:30. So with that being said, Dir3Wolf, thank you for joining me today. It was a pleasure speaking with you, picking your brain about competitive play in a very different way. Obviously, I have my co-hosts who play in comp, but you and I are able to talk from a, balancing commission perspective as well. So really appreciate being here, and really excited to continue these conversations between DBE and COTF as we move forward. But if everyone wants to go say hi next time you're live, where would they find you?
You could find me at Dir3Wolf_TV when I do manage to actually put up a good schedule and being there. That is where you can find me. Would be amazing to have you around. But I have to say, I have to look back on the past 4 hours, I have to say, how we got into contact just, we have to say almost randomly, having a short exchange in DMs, and then we went for a call. It was great in the call. We teamed up again. Now we casted a match together almost 5 hours after meeting each other, and amazing community, amazing host, amazing team in the background, amazing audience, amazing players. It has been a mind-blowing experience. All I can say is thank you for having me tonight. I look forward to talk more to you, exchanging what we currently did, and I think there's a lot of potential coming out of this, and it has been mind-blowing to be here. Thank you so much. It was an amazing experience. Thank you to the teams, the audience. Thank you to you, and that's all I can really say.
Awesome, and thank you as well. Really do appreciate it. With that being said, we'll see you all at 6:30 p.m. CST, and that will be for Cookies versus Prestige. Bye-bye!
Have a good one.